Is crime curable? Once a criminal, always a criminal? Can people change? These basic questions lie at the heart of our criminal justice system. The latest issue of The West Wing profiles Arnulfo Garcia, a serial home burglar and three-striker, who was released from a life sentence this fall. From all indications, Garcia, who was the top editor of a successful prison newspaper, had somehow beaten his addictions and aged out of his crimes. With the help of District Attorney Jeff Rosen, he was released, only to die in a car accident 2 months later. Today, we're talking with the DA about Mr. Garcia and the broader implications of his unusual life cut short. Welcome to the West Wing Companion, sir.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. You've been interviewed many times, but only once by a panel of lifers in prison. Tell us about meeting Arnulfo Garcia for the first time, and what were your impressions?
The first time I met Arnulfo Garcia was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I went up to San Quentin because a defense attorney friend of mine had shown me a copy of the San Quentin newspaper and told me that this was a newspaper that was made by inmates at San Quentin, and maybe there was perhaps one other prison newspaper in the whole country. And so I read this edition of the newspaper. It comes out about once a month, and I was very impressed. It was, it had stories about criminal justice, profiles of different inmates. It had a sports page because different people at San Quentin will play different sports, sometimes against each other, sometimes against groups that come in from the outside. So I was very curious at who the people were that created this newspaper. And I think someone had told me that the newspaper had a growing circulation. And I thought, well, that's pretty impressive, in today's climate of newspapers. So I went up there and I met with about maybe 25 men that created the San Quentin newspaper. And the leader of the group was Arnulfo Garcia. He was the editor-in-chief of the newspaper. And when I went to visit the newspaper staff, he orchestrated the whole meeting. So we sat in a large room, and he had organized the meeting and kind of had laid out the agenda for what we would discuss. So, one, I just thought it was impressive, the organizational ability he had. He was respected certainly by the other inmates. He was articulate and smart, not in any way angry, was curious, was very positive attitude. And one of the things that we did when we went around the room and everyone introduced themselves was the men would say what their name was, what crime they were incarcerated for at San Quentin, and what county they came from. So, almost all of the inmates there, almost all of the 25, were there for murder, attempted murder, gang assault, armed robberies, all very violent offenses. But there were a couple, one of whom was Arnulfo, who was there for residential burglary. So that stood out a little bit to me as different from some of the other inmates that were there. And then, of course, I took special note of inmates. There were 2 or 3 inmates that were convicted from Santa Clara County, so including Arnulfo. So that's the first time I met him.
Was Arnulfo Garcia a one-off, the rare person who can overcome their criminal past in your mind? Do you think criminals can change? And if so, I know it's a bunch of questions, but if so, what does this mean for the state's most recent criminal reform, some of which you supported?
Yes. Well, I certainly think that people can change, and people that have committed crimes have changed. The whole basis of our criminal justice system is the idea that people have free will and make choices. So you're not born a criminal. You may be born in circumstances and neighborhoods with a family that makes it more likely that you may commit crimes than someone else. But nobody is predetermined to grow up and commit crimes. It's a choice that people make. And so because I believe that people choose to commit crimes, I also believe that people can choose not to commit crimes and can choose to rehabilitate themselves. And I think that Arnulfo is an example of someone who did rehabilitate himself, and I think there are many others like Arnulfo. I don't know if I can say what percentage of inmates are likely to rehabilitate themselves. I don't know if I could say it that way, but I do think that there are many others like Arnulfo. Part of the reason I say that is I've met them, and I've met other inmates that have been released to Santa Clara County, who committed their crimes in Santa Clara County, went to prison, were released to Santa Clara County, and are now very successful. I met one gentleman has a very good job working at UPS and is a supervisor there and had been in prison for many years. I met another gentleman who learned computer coding at Santa Clara while he was in San Quentin, and I thought it was kind of fitting that he came from Silicon Valley and he went to prison and he learned computer coding when he got out, and he's doing quite well. So I'm certainly aware of the people who don't rehabilitate themselves and don't change. I've been a prosecutor for 20 years, so I see, and the prosecutors in my office see people like that every day. It's harder for us. It takes more effort for us to see people like Arnulfo that have rehabilitated themselves, because we're not going to see them in court again because they're not going to be there. Mm-hmm. So I've made an effort to expose the prosecutors in our office to success stories, because I think that there are many success stories. So I think that Arnulfo is an example. I think that the fact that he was at San Quentin for the last several years was very helpful towards his rehabilitation. I mean, he worked his way there from being in other prisons by behaving well and being positive. That helped him get to San Quentin, which has a lot of opportunities for inmates. So he took advantage of those opportunities.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Burning Man, an annual California bacchanal known for its art and its setting in a dusty alkaline flat, is not, as far as I know, an approved conference destination of the California Deputy District Attorney Association. There'll be no training next to the cosmic space worm to explore the ramifications of the California Supreme Court's ruling in People versus Sanchez. Yet, in between convictions, Deputy District Attorney Leigh Frazier hitches a ride on a private plane every once in a while to enjoy the spectacle. I'm thrilled that Leigh's here with us to talk about the famous art show and what it's like. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Describe the scene, please. What's an average Tuesday night like on the playa?
Average Tuesday night on the playa is safety first. Number one, you've got to wear lights on you. You've got to find a way to cover yourself in things that light up. And if you're on a bike or whatever your vehicle is, to make sure that lights up too, because it's really dark out there. There are no street lights.
So where do you buy your average light to put on you? I've never gone shopping for lights myself, unless it's flashlights or house lights.
Amazon.com.
What kind did you wear last time? Like, what type of lights, and where do you put them?
L-wire is one thing. It attaches to a battery pack. It's a little wire that lights up that you can put on you. Sometimes I cheat a little bit and I get those little flashy rings, the rubber ones that sometimes kids get at Halloween, and the ones that flash, and I throw on a few of those. And also, I sometimes light myself up with the stuff that people probably use for spelunking. So I've got like the headlamp.
That's wild. What's the art like? I mean, describe some of the art that you saw this year.
The number one word that comes to mind is massive, because you're out on a huge plateau or plain. I'm not sure quite what the right word is, but a huge flat surface. Basically, you're in a basin with mountains all around you. And it gives artists the ability to go really big with their art. So I look at some massive pieces of art. A lot of it you can get into. Lots of people can get into it at once. And a lot of it's flammable too, which is interesting, because a lot of it gets burned at the end. But it can take weeks, months, years to build some of those pieces.
I asked you this before, I think, but do people at Burning Man ever ask you what you do, and how do you respond to that?
it never comes up.
It never does.
I never get asked what I do, and I never ask anybody else what they do, because I feel like I'm so defined by my profession. And also, we also make judgments about people based on their professions. But if none of us knew what anybody else did for a living, then we'd have to get to know each other in a different way. And even in my everyday life, in what I call the default world, in social gatherings, I don't ask people what they do for a living.
Yeah, that's good. But do you have anything in your mind how you would answer the question if somebody did ask you that?
Oh, I just tell them I'm in law enforcement.
I like that. How important this is a broader question, but how important is it for prosecutors, especially trial prosecutors, to find some sort of outlet outside of the office that's completely different than 70 West Heading Street?
I'd say it's vital. And if you talk to most of us, we have that outlet. And for me, that is 1 week out of the year where I get together in a place where I know all of my friends are going to be there. And I think some of the best memories I've made there is just like sort of the quiet times when you're just, with a girlfriend, you're having a heart to heart. And I really cherish that time. And there's no other time that I've been able to get all of my friends in one place at one time. And that has been a good help to me. And I would encourage everyone to just break outside the confines of work occasionally and, expand and broaden your horizons.
It refreshes you?
It drains me and refreshes me. You're in a really harsh desert environment. I don't think I could stress that enough. There are, and when I talk about it like this, people are probably wondering, like, why would you want to go in the first place? But it's very hot at night. It's very hot during the day, very cold at night. Dust storms, dust that can be blinding dust storms. And it's, so at the end of it, I feel refreshed, but at the same time, I almost feel like I need a vacation from that vacation. I just didn't want to, go lay down somewhere for a little while just to recover. There's music going all night long. So the thought of getting a good night's sleep there, I would not go there for a restful time. That being said, I did end up sleeping most of my time there. Right. just not a quiet sleep, I guess I would say.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
I appreciate your time.